Voiceover Coffee Shop, episode number 27.
Welcome to the Voiceover Coffee Shop, where we share our morning with some of the finest names in voiceover. And now, here's your host, voice actor Andrew Morrison.
Hi there. My name is Andrew Morrison, and welcome to the Voiceover Coffee Shop, where we start our day with some of the finest names in voiceover. If you'd like to know more about me, feel free to visit my personal website at www.andrewdmorrison.com. In this episode, we have coffee with my dear friend, Ian Russell. Ian is a British-American voice actor who has given a distinct and dynamic voice life in a global audience. Ian's warm, international tones have found their way in corporate narration, e-learning, wildlife documentaries, internet explainer or promo projects, and exceptional video game work, all of which have earned him multiple nominations from both the One Voice Awards and SOVAS, to name just a few. In this episode, we talk about being a foreign voice in an American market, preparing for an audition, and building a mindset towards success. How are you this morning, Ian?
I'm good, Andrew. Apart from my sore arms.
From all the pinball.
From all the pinball.
So how do you take your coffee?
Not very often is the answer.
Really?
I'm a Brit, so guess what? I drink tea, and I don't drink it the southern way. You know, cold and with sugar is my idea of a tea nightmare. I like it hot, no sugar, and a drop of milk. But as I don't know, this isn't a visual medium, but although this is a pint glass, it's full of water, what I am drinking from.
Well, what kind of tea do you drink?
English black tea is my go-to, you know, or what you might see as breakfast tea or Irish breakfast tea, or, you know, any number of versions of what is broadly the same thing. It's a blend of black teas. We actually have our own tea bush in the garden.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
In North
Which
Carolina?
we harvest and make a bit of tea from. It comes out quite smoky, with a sort of an Earl Grey sort of thing going on. Not that we add any bergamot or anything, but it's quite unusual, and it's okay. I'm more of a Tetley guy, or plug for a British tea manufacturer. Sorry.
No. So you started in finance, and you even went to school for chemistry. So how did you end up in the voiceover world?
Well, when I was a young man, even before then. So my first conscious memory is a visual, partly visual, but mostly olfactory. It's a smell, and it's you know, they always talk about the smell of the grease paint. It's not that. It's the backstage smell of an old theater. It's a sort of a slightly damp, musty wood sort of smell. And I remember it because my mother was a very keen actress. I mean, she wasn't a professional, but she treated it like a profession. And so when I was very, very young and she was involved in whatever shows, I was taken to the theater and dumped in the wings while she went and did what she did. And so that's my very first memory. So I grew up around theater. So I did that all through my school, college, and into my young, you know, and I tried to be a professional actor and failed miserably. So the finance thing was, you know, I had bills to pay. So I went and got a job that involved selling financial things to unsuspecting people. I did that for almost 30 years. So how did I get into voice acting? So my wife, who's American, and that's why I live in America, didn't know me when I was being an actory person, but she obviously knew that I had, and she bought me, I was the dad that made silly voices around the dinner table, and she bought me yeah, struggling to, you know, what do you buy the man who has everything for Christmas? She bought me a 1-day workshop, Introduction to Voiceovers. I was that guy, you know, that you see on the forums a lot. You know, oh, you know, I've got a great voice. I do funny voices, and I've been to a workshop, and now I'm a professional voice actor. You know, I was that guy, and so probably for about 2 years. That was in 2012. For about 2 years, I went backwards. I trundled. We were living in Oxford, or near Oxford, and I trundled up on the train to London. And did, you know, workshops with this organization called The Showreel, run by a guy called JP Orr, who's immense, and cut my first demos, and a vocal coach called Yvonne Morley, who used to be head of voice at LAMDA, which is the London Academy of Music. So she knows what she's talking about. I kind of fell into safe hands, as it were, and then we got to a point where we were going to sell up and move to the US because finance was becoming a bit of a nightmare for me. In terms, well, I don't know, bore you with a long story, but you know, that whole period after the credit crunch and all the banks were falling over and they were shedding people, and so where I was, they were looking for volunteers, and I said, yeah, I'll go. So I went. Fell on my sword and came and moved here, and I was like, what am I going to do? I still need to work. I still need to do something. I can't rattle around a house. So I went to JP and I said, okay, I'm moving to America in 6 months. I guess I'll need some demos, and I'm going to give this voiceover-y thing a go. Will anyone ever hire me? And he said, don't see why not. Don't see why not. So that was the ringing endorsement that I came here with, and I met some people in Greenville here. You may be aware of Lisa Biggs.
Yeah, absolutely.
She was all but the first person I met when I landed here. She was living in Greenville at the time.
That's a good first person to meet.
I know, isn't it? You know, every time I've turned around and met somebody, it's been some illuminous person within the industry, and I'm like, oh, all right. So I arrived metaphorically, I almost actually literally arrived on a Thursday and walked into a studio on the Monday in Greenville, and Lisa was there handing out cakes.
Wow.
That's how I met her. And she said, oh, we're having this agent showcase next weekend. Why don't you come? So I went and I did my thing, and I went to the agent afterwards and I said, so what happens next? And he said, oh, I guess I'll put you on my books. That was Jeffrey Umberger, who you'll know. I know. So I've arrived off an aeroplane. I've met Lisa Biggs. I've met Jeffrey Umberger. He's put me up. So I've got an agent. I don't even own a microphone.
Yeah, anybody listening to this is just getting into voiceover. This is not how it works at all, by the way.
Well, clearly it can work that way, but it's not what people would consider to be a normal. I mean, what you don't see, of course, is that I had done workshops and trained with a vocal coach for 2 or 3 years.
Okay, gotcha.
Before I even got to that point, you know. So I guess I kind of, you know, and I had been a bit of a, you know, amateur, you know, failed actor in my past, and I have a theatrical thing running through my family. So I guess in some senses it wasn't completely surprising, but you know, yeah, I came at it kind of a bit backwards, I think. Naivety.
So out of curiosity, you said your wife's American. How did you end up meeting her with being in the UK?
Well, I wasn't. I was in Holland at the time. And her friend Jennifer was getting married, but Jennifer's dad had passed away. Jennifer's uncle worked in Holland. So Jennifer wanted to, and was going to give her away at her wedding. So Jennifer wanted to come over and meet Uncle Bill and chat about the wedding, and didn't want to travel on her own. So Sandra traveled with Jennifer to Holland to have a bit of a break and meet Uncle Bill. And Uncle Bill worked for me.
Gotcha.
And so Uncle Bill was older and they were younger, and they wanted to see the bright lights of Den Haag in the Holland. And so Uncle Bill said, we'll go round Ian's place. So they came and visited my little bachelor pad on the 5th floor of an apartment building with an uninterrupted view of the beach and the sea. And I don't know, rest is history, I suppose. 20 years later.
That's fantastic.
25 years later, we celebrate our 20th wedding anniversary next year.
Oh, congratulations.
So it's a while ago that happened. So that's how we met in Holland. She came and, I jokingly say, she knocked on my front door and said, hello, my name's Sandra. Which is sort of it's sort of true, but it's a bit of a joke, really. Yeah.
So has your background in finances ever like kind of helped your voiceover career? I mean, I know it must make bookkeeping a little easier, but have you ever?
No, I'm not an accountant. No, let's get right. I'm not an accountant.
Okay.
So
what were you doing in finance?
Bookkeeping is a horror. I was a wealth manager.
Okay. Gotcha.
So, well, for example, towards the end of my career, I was working for one of the UK's largest private banks.
Oh.
So they were linked to one of the retail banks, and so the retail bank's job, if I don't know, a millionaire walked through the door, was to say, thanks very much, we need to refer you to private bank, and then private bank will look after you. And we had bank managers in private bank who would look after the bank bit, and then sometime later, if there was things like inheritance tax planning, trust planning, all that kind of thing, wealth management, portfolio management, then they would go, oh, you need to meet, and if it was in my geography, it would be me, and I'd wander along to their multi-million-dollar house and meet the wife and kids and have tea and scones and talk about what they wanted to do with their money and that. And then sometimes they'd go, yeah, I'll do that with you, and sometimes you'd never hear from them again. But they were quite demanding clients, you can imagine.
Yeah, absolutely.
How does that help?
Yeah, any experience that kind of like,
I come to voice acting from a corporate background, not from a acting background.
Okay.
So my starting point is I'm running a business. My starting point is not I'm an actor.
Gotcha.
So I work hard. I try and do things in a streamlined way. When we were chatting earlier, you were asking about what I'm speaking at One Voice in August in Dallas. What am I going to speak about? For, I don't know, 30 minutes or so, I will speak about some of the numbers that I pay attention to that I think help me be successful.
Any hints on what those numbers might be?
I'm not going to steal my own thing.
Right.
It would be ridiculous. They're actually not difficult numbers, and they're not numbers you should be frightened of. But I do think that if you're going to treat your voice acting business as a business, then there are important numbers to be aware of. Yeah, I do think it's important.
Absolutely.
But I wouldn't I? They always talk about voice actor, and it's got the word actor in it, so you need to be able to act and have a voice. And then you add on, it's a voice actor business. So you've got to have a voice, you've got to be able to act, and you've got to have a little bit of business nous about you. And there's plenty of other people, who are helping people understand what they can do as a business to be successful. It's not just me. I'm not some of, Mark Scott, for example, is probably one of the higher profile guys, with his VOpreneur. So, that sort of thing. And I'm not even treading on his toes because he's more of a marketing guy, I would say. He's always coming at it from a marketing perspective. So this is nuts and bolts, back office.
Right.
Boring stuff.
So
and I think the person who's presenting, these things, is always someone else. The person who's presenting, I forget who it is, but it's some high profile, wonderful, coachy person. There's a lady, I think. So I'm thinking everybody's going to go to her session and nobody's going to come to my session. because her session is bound to be much more exciting than mine.
So does going to numbers, does most of your booking come from marketing, or are you doing it through agency, or are you doing like just open auditions?
All of the above.
All of the
You
above.
know, why that's the other thing. And so how does my finance background help me? Again, when I talked about Holland, when I first moved to Holland, the guy that ran that business, he talked about having a business radar.
Mhm.
Like this, always
Right.
be, and if you like, in the UK, the convenience store, the corner shop, which is open all hours. Not that he said you should work all the hours God sends, but that you should have that mentality that you're always open to the possibility that there might be work. And lo and behold, it's there. If you look for it, if you build it, they will come. Well, it's not quite like that, but if you look for it, it is there. And again, a sort of a business story. So I was running a team in Holland, and I said most of the business came from Amsterdam and The Hague and Rotterdam. And there's another town sort of in the middle of the country called Utrecht. And I said, okay, we don't get any business out of Utrecht. Why are people not going to Utrecht to find business? So I ran a little competition. I said, okay, first person to go and get a client in Utrecht and bring them back and write the business gets this very large bottle of champagne. Nobody went. Nothing. I went, all right. So I went. 2 weeks later, I'd written business with a client in Utrecht. So I kept the bottle of champagne for myself.
Gosh.
If you look for it, it's there. You just got to look for it. So I don't have one string. I don't have one string to my bow. So yes, I get work through agents. I get work through online casting. I get work through direct marketing. I get work through social media. Get work through local connections, networking, which was a surprise to me, but in this part of the world. But nevertheless, referrals from other voice actors.
Yeah.
It's everywhere. I'm often heard saying there is a veritable mountain of work available if you choose to look for it.
Fantastic. What's one piece of work, just an example, where you did not expect to find work in that place?
Locally.
Mhm.
So I live in South Carolina, y'all. And I'm a Brit. So who's going to hire a Brit to market their local, air conditioning business? I say, let us come and fix your broken air conditioning unit. $8,000, no problem. I just had that. I had, my fault, the wrong mindset. I didn't think people would hire me. And so they didn't. And then my wife will get credit for this. One of the local churches was having a high tea. And she knew someone who had all this old British crockery.
Mhm.
So we borrowed that, and we and she decided on my behalf that we were sponsoring a table. So we went and we set up the table with all the crockery and the cups and saucers and plates and all that, and we put my business cards around the table. And a few months later, I got a phone call from the church. They do this thing, this sort of I guess you call it a live event experience around Easter time.
Yeah.
Where they have people at different stations telling the story, if you like, of the Easter story. And what they decided was that they wanted to have like a museum tour, an audio tour of these things, and they wanted someone to do it, and they hired me.
Man.
And then they wanted a children's version of it, and they hired my daughter to do that. So suddenly, this is one of the sort of the big churches with all the video productions and all that. So that was a really interesting experience, and it made me realize that maybe I had something that was marketable locally, and I've done work for quite a lot of churches now, and you know, and the Billy Graham Institute in Charlotte, you know, and it suddenly there's all this other work, real estate at the luxury end particularly. It's, you know, who wouldn't want my plummy tones booming out from you saying, please buy this $10 million seaside home, you know.
Right.
You know, there's market, there's, so as I said, so my mindset has now changed. It's there's a veritable mountain of work there if you go looking for it, and I had closed the door on that, and I regret it, because 5 years later I'm now doing business locally.
And so on the coaching side, you've done a lot of you've had a lot of coaching sessions where you've done a lot of coaching. What are some of the key things that you've learned from your past coaches that have kind of been great landmarks in helping your business and helping your performance?
Pre-life, particularly.
Pre-life?
Pre-life. So you've got a script, and that script is a person that you're portraying, right? It's a CEO, or you know, if it's a corporate thing, or it's an orc in a game, whatever. But before that moment in the game, that CEO or that orc was doing something. They didn't just materialize into that meeting from, you know, the ether and be a CEO. They were doing something beforehand.
Wow.
So even if it's walking into the room with a file under your foot, you know, like, okay, I've got to go into this meeting now. Here's my file, and here I go. Just, you know, even a couple of words verbalized, and it's amazing when I've talked to other people about it and said, okay, do it, and say, hey Andrew, did you know that? And off you go, whatever it happens to be, whatever little sentence you choose that fits the context. I have found a great deal of resistance from people to actually physically do that and verbalize it. They'd rather do it in their head. But I have found by verbalizing it, so if I'm struggling with a read, I too will often verbalize it in my head first. But if it's not just working, I'll verbalize it and you know, edit it out afterwards. I'm forever saying, you know, with my daughter, I coach my daughter through her reads when she's doing them. You know, just doesn't matter. Flub away, make all sorts of, we can always edit it out in post. We can always get rid of it afterwards. So verbalize, hey Andrew, did you know that we just opened a new factory with 70,000 square feet, whatever it is? You know?
I did not know that. Did you make sure that you put that in the right files, or?
and just cut it out afterwards. So I learned that from there was a guy in Greenville. His name is Stanley Fisher. He's now in Florida. We're still in touch, but he was in terms of understanding the American market and how that works, he was very influential, and he taught me that. He introduced me to that idea. So there you go. That's my big tip for today. Pre-life.
Pre-life.
Imagine what the person was doing before the event that you're portraying happened.
That's fantastic. So what, I mean, other than pinball, what do you enjoy doing outside of the booth? Like what really, like what refills you? Because I mean, we stare at screens a lot, and we spend a lot of time in our little studio. So how do you refresh yourself?
We have a dog, which you may hear at some point. So we walk the dog. You know, I'm at an age where rushing around and doing highly. I used to play a lot of sport. I was a sportsman, and I'm not so much. I play golf now, and a bit of pinball once in a while. You call a sport, but there you go. So we try and make sure, if not every week, at least every other week, we go somewhere out into the wilds, sort of a nicely well paved path through the wilds, if that's all right, and get out in the fresh air and walk the dog and clear the cobwebs. So that, if you like, in a sense, gets me out of the little, you know, the enclosed box. I have a family, so, you know, we spend time together. You know, in America, shopping's a thing. So I suppose as a man, I wouldn't say shopping's high on my list of priorities, but as a family man, you support your family. So I do that. Play golf with my father-in-law. We try and play every week, but that doesn't happen because what's been really interesting for me through the pandemic is that I have found myself booking increasingly regularly live directed sessions rather than self-directed sessions.
Really?
Yeah, it's kind of odd. I'm not sure why. Maybe directors are rattling at home and they think, well, I'll connect live and do it, rather than just going, I've got other things to do, you do it, I'm going to go off and do something else. Maybe it's something to do with that, I don't know. Just invented that thought. But yeah, so I have live booked sessions, I don't know, every week it seems. Multiple. I had to go to the UK. My mum needed to move into assisted living. She's quite elderly, and the week before I went, so you do that thing where you tell everybody I'm going to be away.
Mm-hmm.
If you need something, I need to know now.
Mm-hmm.
And I had 8 live sessions in the 5 days before I left. Crazy. I know. I was basically jumping from one session to the next for a week, which was a first.
That's awesome.
You know, I had what have I done this week? So it's Monday. Monday was yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have a live session yesterday. I've got a live session this afternoon, and I've got one on Thursday for a game. That's what I've got booked this week for live sessions. So I was going to play golf on Wednesday, but it's going to rain on Wednesday. No, there's some other event happening at the golf course on Wednesday, so we can't play Wednesday. So golf's out this week.
Gotcha.
Hey ho.
So if you were to go back to when you were working in wealth management, if you were going to write yourself
Do I have to?
Well, if you were to write yourself a letter now and to tell yourself back during those days from your perspective, what would that letter say?
Leave now.
Leave. You didn't like
go be a voice actor now.
You didn't enjoy wealth
not
management?
that I didn't.
I mean, I know this is so much better, but you didn't enjoy
it. So I enjoyed 80% of it for 70% of the time, let's say.
Okay.
You know, there was a lot of it that you know, I loved the client relationship part. I talked about, you know, sitting in people's wonderful houses and getting to know them and chatting about their lives and what they wanted to achieve with their lives. And, you know, it's not the money's not important. It's really not. It's what the money does for you that's important. And so that's with the kind of conversations we'd have. And then you'd end up with a solution at the end of it. And people go, oh, well, that does what we said we wanted to do. So great, I'll do that. So that part of it was great. But towards the end, so again, just to reflect on that, as banks were trying to shed people because they're expensive and they're trying to technologize the process. So the people that were there to support me doing what I did best were no longer there. So the bits that, you know, so I would go out, I don't know, 8 till 6 with commutes, visiting people, collecting data from people, having chats. I'd get home at 6, have dinner with the family for 30 minutes, 45 minutes, and then sit down with my computer to write a 50-page report. You know, so it became unenjoyable. So, you know, there was that part of it. But the freedom that I have now, of expression, the responsibility is all mine. So if, you know, do it sooner, I suppose. Leave now means do it sooner, because, you know, I'm 7 years in and I look back and I think, well, I could have been 15 years in, or I could have been 20 years in. When I was in my mid to late 20s, and I was doing the amateur theatre stuff, a friend of mine worked for a local radio station in Liverpool in England. And I don't know exactly when it was, you could look it up, but Paul McCartney, now Sir Paul McCartney, bought his old school and turned it into LIPA, the Liverpool Institute for Performing Arts. And he pre-recorded an interview with Radio City, the local radio station. And my friend was responsible for getting this out on the air.
Mhm.
And he decided, rather than him asking banal questions to a microphone and then cutting it together, he would make it more of a theatrical event.
Mhm.
And so he asked me if I would go in and record snippets of a fake interview with one of Paul McCartney's teachers.
Gotcha.
So I played Paul McCartney's teacher in this interview. That was what I did. And that was back when, so that was my first encounter with voiceover, although I didn't really know it at the time.
Mhm.
I look back on that now and I think, why was voiceover not a thing?
Right.
You know, it's much more of a thing now, it seems to me. So in my mid to late 20s, I could have started being a voice actor, and I could be a 40-year veteran, you know, and I'd be Peter Dixon, you know.
Right.
When I read his book, and he and I are a very similar age, and we had very similar starts in life, and then he went off and became one of the most famous voices in British broadcasting, and I went and flogged investments to unsuspecting millionaires. I mean, and you know, so what would I say? Yeah, you know, that voiceover thing, do that now. That's fun.
Absolutely. So where can people find you, and where can people find your work?
If you go, well, Google is your friend. If you put, so so one thing I did, which was a bit different, I think, to what most people do. Most people brand their voiceover business as, I don't know, Andrew Morrison VO, Ian Russell VO. That's, you know, your name.
Yeah.
Okay, name me a creative director who doesn't know you, who is going to go onto Google and go, I'm looking for Andrew Morton voiceover.
None. That's where direct marketing comes in, right?
Right, but what if your brand, so my brand, if you want to find me on the internet, if you, let's say you were a creative director and you were looking for a British voice and you typed British voiceovers, my name will come up. I won't be the only one, but my name will come up because my branding is the British voice.
Gotcha.
It's not Ian Russell, it's the British voice, or Ian Russell, the British voice. So all my social media, and my website is britishvoiceovers.com.
Gotcha.
I still do have thebritishvoice.net as well, because I couldn't get .com because somebody already had it. Damn them. You look on LinkedIn, I'm Ian Russell, the British voice. You look on Instagram, it's the British voice. You look on Twitter, it's the British Voic, because someone already had the British voice. Dang them. So if you want to find me, just search Ian Russell, the British voice, or the British voice, or British voiceovers. I'll be there somewhere. You'll find me. My website is british-voiceovers.com. That's me. That's what I do. That came out of a naivety as well, because I came here, I arrived in America, and so I'm going to be a British voiceover person. There's going to be no one else here doing that, so I'll call myself the British voice and everybody will find me, only to discover that there's one on every street corner, a British voice, that is, because there's lots of us here being voiceover people, and they're all lovely.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate this. This has been great. Thank you.
Did we learn anything?
Yes, I learned a lot. Thank you.
Come to if you're coming to Dallas to the One Voice conference, please come to my talk, because there's nobody else there.
I will be there.
I really hope you enjoyed listening to Ian talk about how his marketing skills built him into a multi-award nominated voice actor, and how he used his past skills to build a voiceover career towards success. If you'd like to know more about Ian, you can visit him at www.british-voiceovers.com. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to the VoiceOver Coffee Shop. For more information on guests, new episodes, and more, be sure to visit www.theocoffeeshop.com.